Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I'm here to talk about all the books that I read in the month of August, and I read quite a few books. So let's just get right to it. The first book that I finished in August was Ungrading: Why Rating Students Undermines Learning and What to Do Instead. It's an edited collection of essays by Susan D. Blum. I really enjoyed this book. If you're a teacher and haven't come across the concept of ungrading, I think you really need to pick this up or do a little bit of research on it. I love this concept. I wasn't able to implement it in time for the current semester that I'm teaching in, but it is something that I'm keeping in mind and I hope to implement soon. The next book that I finished was The Last Shtelt. I know I'm mispronouncing things, but this is by Max Gross, and I heard about it from Courtney over at Courtney Ferder, and I really enjoyed this. So one, it's a fictional premise, right? Like this did not occur, but the premise is that there's a village in Poland that basically the world forgot. They didn't experience World War II. Somehow, like, the Nazis just skipped by them because they were so rural, and they've maintained very traditional Jewish practices, rural life, no modern conveniences, no modern technology. The Romani kind of come through the village every so often, but that's it. That's the only connection they have to the outside world. From time to time, somebody will leave the village, so it's kind of run away, and they are never heard from again. So they really have had no contact with the outside world. That premise was what captured me. I was like, that sounds fantastic. It's a chance to explore both kind of more traditional Jewish practices, but also the meaning of the modern world. That's when you really have to define it and come to terms with it, because you're going to have to explain it to people who have no concept of this. I really enjoyed this. This was a 4 out of 5 star reads for me. And the story you follow, the voice of one individual that kind of provides the first contact with the outside world, but also a couple. Like, the village becomes connected to the outside world through a couple that got married and then was having a lot of marital problems. The wife runs away and then the husband disappears, and so the leaders of this Jewish village decide that it's time to make contact with the outside world because they fear that something bad has happened, that maybe the husband has done something to his former wife. I like that aspect of it. Was really intriguing. Anyways, there's a lot of really interesting things here, and if you're interested at all, I think you should pick it up. The next book that I finished was The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. This is such a fun book. Thank you to Dee Dee over at Brown Girl Reading and the whole group that does the read along every year. Yeah, I had so much fun with this. It's really just like an action adventure book, and I had fun. It's funny, it's great. Yeah, there are times in which it lags a little bit, but overall, I did not expect to have this much fun with the Three Musketeers, and I just did. The next book that I finished was Front Desk by Kelly Young. I'd heard some really good things about this book, and I finally picked it up. The premise is you follow a Chinese American kid whose parents have migrated to the U.S. and are just trying to make their way in the U.S. and are having a really hard time. They end up getting a job running the front desk of this motel. And our main character ends up really running the front desk while her parents do everything else that they have to do when it comes to running the hotel. I really loved it. This is a middle grade book, and it just has a lot of really great themes. However, it was hard to get into at first because our main character is a child. She's in school, and she's having to do very adult things and keeps ruining things for her family. So the first third of the book, it's her making cringe decision after cringe decision, getting them fired, getting them into trouble, just really things she doesn't mean to be causing harm, but she does. And I almost DNF'd the book at that point because it was just making me feel really uncomfortable, and like I was getting secondhand embarrassment for her. However, this is a series, and if the rest of the series continues the way, you know, the rest of the 2/3 of the book were, I think I'm gonna keep reading, and it's gonna be worth my time. So I ultimately enjoyed this book enough that I want to pick up the next book and kind of go from there. The next book I finished was Big Chicas Don't Cry by Annette Chavez Macias. I have a dedicated review on my channel, so go check it out if you're interested. The premise is that you have these 4 cousins in Southern California who grew up together but have become, well, one of them has kind of distanced herself from the family, and so there's a lot of interpersonal relationships. They're all juggling family responsibilities, their own friendships, romantic relationships, work. It's just a really, really fantastic book. Next book I picked up was Dark Waters by Katherine Arden. This is book number 3 in the Small Spaces series, a middle grade horror series that actually makes me afraid. Like, I have a hard time reading this at night because I end up having nightmares whenever I read this series, but in like the best way possible. That sounds like it's a contradiction, but I just really like this series. This was a 3-star read for me because I thought the pacing was a little bit off, and it wasn't quite as enjoyable to me as the 2 previous books in the series. There's one more book in the series, and so I'm hoping to pick that up this month. The next book I finished was The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. If you don't know anything about redlining, if you don't know anything about segregation, especially in the North and West, basically in cities, you should really pick up this book. This is a reminder that segregation existed not just in the American South, but also all over the United States, and happened in all kinds of official ways. Like, this was government sponsored segregation that you didn't necessarily need to have laws that said no, black people cannot live in this neighborhood. You just needed the government to have certain policies where they would only back up certain kind of home loans. And guess what? They only backed up home loans for white buyers and not black buyers. And this caused tremendous consequences all over the U.S. So particularly like cities like Chicago, New York are discussed, San Francisco, Los Angeles. It covers a wide range of northern and western cities. So this was just a great book to read. It is nonfiction. It can be a little bit heavy at times. There's a lot of discussions of like the law, and especially because in terms of the Supreme Court and what they ruled constitutional or not. So some of that was particularly dry and hard to get into, but I still think it's a really amazing book. Next book I finished was Murders in Westminster by Vanessa Riley. This is an excellent book. I also have a dedicated review to this book, so I won't get into it, but definitely check that out if you're interested. This is a murder mystery set in Regency, England, in which the main character is black, and she is just fantastic. I've just fallen in love with Vanessa Riley's books. I said in my dedicated review that it had a very cozy mystery feel, even though it is really much more of a thriller. There's, you know, some action-packed scenes and all of that, but it has this like cozy feel. If you've read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, this has, to me, leans, it has a lot, chunks of it that lean more cozy, but incredibly interesting characters. It's gonna be a series, and I just cannot wait to keep reading in this series. The next book I finished was Troublemaker by John Cho. Yes, that John Cho, the actor. He co-wrote this book, and it's following a Korean-American kid, a young kid in Los Angeles during the Rodney King riot / insurrection, and really tries to explore the the way in which the Rodney King beating and then the acquittal of the two officers affected the Black community, and especially and the Korean American community. Like, those points of view are intertwined in the story. Our main character is Korean American. His family owns a business in South Central Los Angeles, and while their shop is spared, as he goes through the day, we kind of explore all these different points of views based on the people that he's coming across. I thought it was a really well done book, and really interested if you're really interesting if you are interested in kind of historical fiction. This is technically historical fiction now, but also just the dynamics of Los Angeles history as well. Yeah, it was not a perfect book. I thought there were a few things here and there with when Cho was a little bit heavy-handed at times, and other times the pacing felt off, but overall just an excellent book. The next book I finished was West Side Love Story by Priscilla Oliveras. Oh my goodness, this is a romance novel, and I cannot tell you how much I loved it. This follows our hero and heroine are both in rival mariachi bands. Rival mariachi bands. And they can't get to, like, they meet each other without knowing that who the other one is. When they find out, though, immediately there's like, oh goodness, we cannot be seen together. Our families will really raise the alarm. They will not like this. But they're actually put in charge of bridging the animosity between the two families when they enter a competition in which they're the main rivals for and candidates to win this competition. This is a low heat book in terms of the sex scenes are all closed door. Like, Priscilla Oliveras takes us all the way up to, like, okay, they're getting physical, and then closes the door on us. But let me tell you, closed door romance has never been this sexy. Like, the heat feels really high. Even though I've read, you know, erotica and romance that is much higher heat, I'm like, this is really spicy. Closed door. I'll put it that way. But I really love what Priscilla Oliveira has been doing in her books in the last few years. It's just really great work, and this tells the story of these two people and their families so beautifully. I can't wait for the next installment in the series. The next book that I finished was Freedom, the Story of the Black Panther Party by Jetta Grace Martin. This is aimed at a young adult audience and tells the story of the Black Panther Party, but it does such a really great job at getting into the nitty-gritty of who these people were, rivalries among them, contradictions within the party, things they did really well and things where they really, like, dropped the ball, where things fell apart. And I think that if you're interested in the Black Panther Party and learning more about its history, this is actually a really fantastic place to start. It gets you through all the main things you need to know, and actually gets deep into some of these nitty-gritty things that you're not gonna get from, like, a Wikipedia entry. So I'm highly recommending it to everybody. If I'd had time, I would have assigned this for my classes. I didn't have time to order the book and, like, assign it and make, you know, curriculum from using the book, but next time I teach my U.S. history classes, I'm going to probably assign this particular book. And then the last book that I finished in the month of August was A More Beautiful and Terrible History, The Uses and Misuses of Civil Rights History by Jeanne Theoharis. Ooh, this is a nonfiction book that is so incredibly fantastic. It really goes through how the memory of the civil rights movement was created, the way we've created a vision of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, those two figures in particular, which kind of eliminates the radical nature of the politics of these two people. These two people were radical people. They had really radical ideas, revolutionary ideas, and they've been kind of reduced to peaceful protest and then used as a weapon against protesters and activists today in a way that is really wrong once you really dig into the lives and the beliefs of these two people. It also goes through the way in which women have been left out of the telling of the civil rights history. And I loved every aspect of that, because that is one thing where I noticed that is largely left out. But it's hard to find the history and the knowledge of the women that participated, how they contributed, and the large impact women had. For example, there's a few chapters in here in which Theoharis focuses on Coretta Scott King. And Coretta Scott King is one of these women who has a major impact, not just as a wife of Martin Luther King Jr., but as an activist herself. She was actually one more radical than Martin Luther King Jr. Like, for her, civil rights was not just an American project, it was a global project. She, from the very start, incorporated a critique of the U.S. military and intervention abroad in a way that Martin Luther King Jr. had to kind of walk towards. And so she's really amazing, and we should really know and celebrate her much more than we do, because we really don't recognize her very much. And she is in part to be celebrated because she's the one that preserves the legacy of King, and you know, it was active and instrumental in passing the Martin Luther King holiday, for example. And yeah, you learn so much civil rights history while also hearing a critique of current society. The book was written during the Trump administration, so there's a lot of commentary on that, which still continues to be very timely. I love this book. I think if you're interested in civil rights history, if you're interested in nonfiction, you'll really like it. There are parts that might be a little bit academic, but they're smaller and far in between. So I think this is actually quite an accessible book for anybody who reads nonfiction or someone who is trying to get into nonfiction. Like, I think this is one of those books that makes it easy to do those things. So that is it. Those are all the books that I read in August. August is always a really busy month for me because it's the month in which my semester starts. So I need to be prepping for classes at the same time that I am trying to continue my reading habits and not let like work completely overtake my for fun reading. So I feel like I read a lot of excellent things this month, and it was just great timing with a lot of it, actually. So let me know if you've read any of these, if you're interested in them, if you have questions, if you want to add your commentary on any of these books, leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.